All right, good morning, everyone. Good to see you all in the heart of summer. I'm going to call this meeting of TRPA's Advisory Planning Commission to order. Today is Wednesday, July 9th, 2025. It is 9:32. The first item on the agenda is the roll call to determine our quorum, and I'll go to Catherine for that.
Mr. Alling,
Present.
Ms. Carr. I'll circle back. Mr. Drake.
Morning.
Mr. Drew,
Good morning.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Here.
Ms. Ferris, Mr. Hill, Ms. Jacobson. Here. Mr. Judge.
Here.
Mr. Thank you. Mr. McNamara.
Here.
Ms. Marolis O'Neill,
Good morning.
Ms. Cyber, Ms. Dollar, Chief Stephen,
Good morning.
Mr. Teixeira,
Morning.
Mr. Thomas.
Here.
Chairman Smokey. Mr. Young. And I believe Ms. Carr is here, but hasn't joined yet. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
And I'm here as well, but I think you know that.
Thank you, Mr. Ferry.
Perfect. All right, we have a quorum. Thank you all for being here. I know everybody's busy. And Catherine, I'm going to come right back to you for the meeting rules of the day, please. The remote meeting rules. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For members of the public joining us today to observe the meeting, visit www.trpa.gov. Under the calendar header, select Advisory Planning Commission meeting, hybrid meeting for today's date. There you will find a link to the public webinar. To make a comment, raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen when the relevant agenda item comes up. If you've joined by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. For informational items, public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting during general public comment. For action or possible action items, public comment will be taken before the commission takes any action. From remote APC members, please raise your hand to speak. Mute your microphone unless you are speaking and keep your camera on if you're able. Remote APC members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations.
Well done. Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate that. I'll just note that Mr. Young did join us. Good morning. And Ms. Carr is here. You're right. So we have a full table. It's great.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move us on to item 2, which is approval of the agenda. Staff, do we have any amendments to the agenda?
No changes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, John. I will deem the agenda approved as it was posted for the record. And I'm going to move us on to item 3. This is approval of our minutes from our last meeting. We do have a draft set of minutes from June 11, 2025. It's on page 5 of your packets. Any APC members have any comments or questions on the minutes? Steve, you're good? Anyone online? Don't see anyone. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
And I will dance around at your invitation to entertain with a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Steve.
Second.
Thank you, Kevin. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Do we have any objections or abstentions? None. Beautiful. Moving on. We're on to item 4. This is our public hearing. And first we will hear agenda item 4A. It's a discussion and possible recommendation of approval of number 1, Connections 2050 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Communities Strategy, and 2, Associated Regional Plan Consistency Findings and a finding of no significant environmental effect. Information on this item can be found on page 46 of your packets. And I'm going to say good morning and turn this over to Michelle Glickert and team to present on this item. So good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Ferry and members of the commission.
You are right. That is a capital T for sure. And team, there was a lot of folks here, including our new intern here. He also pitched in over the last week. So yeah, we've got a full team behind the scenes, and also online. We have our environmental consultants, Rebecca Cremine on my right. And of course, our legal team supporting us through all of this. Rachel Shaw is probably online as well. I'll stop there. We've got a lot. So thank you. Yeah, today I will be presenting a summary of Connections 2050, and that is our transportation plan, sustainable community strategy for the region. Next slide. So Connections 2050, it's more than a 25-year transportation vision. It also identifies a host of projects and the foreseeable funds to implement those projects. It satisfies 3 distinct transportation planning authorities. So that is our TRPA compact, our role as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO, and our role as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, and that's in California. Now, the RTP is the transportation element of our regional plan also. So it implements not only that, but also helps us maintain our threshold standards. Next slide. So our plan is not similar to many regional transportation plans. It doesn't contain multi-lane interchanges, expansion of our roadways. Our projects and programs continue to focus on increasing our multimodal travel options, getting people out of their cars. So all of this revolves around these 6 goals and our 4 strategies. Our project list is updated each cycle, changing only slightly. This time around, we have about 30% new projects on the list. And these do often, and that's because I think you guys know in Tahoe, 4 years to get a project done is pretty aspirational. So oftentimes that project list is updated, but only parts of it change. So we did, however, over the last couple of years, we've worked a lot on updating other plans that fold into the regional transportation plan. We updated our safety plan. We now have a Vision Zero plan and our active transportation plan. Both of those were before you last year. So those recommendations and priority projects all fold into the regional transportation plan. Now back to those strategies and our T's. So transit, our vision in the plan is for reliable services that connect us to our town centers, our recreation destinations, and that's within Tahoe and also outside of the region. Trails, we really need to have safe and connected trails, which covers bike lanes, sidewalks, also the paths for walking and rolling. So this is also around the lake. And again, connections to our town centers and our recreation sites. Technology, managing the system. That's what it's all about. It's building in convenience and information, finding transportation options easily on your phone or in other sources, parking availability. It's all about that. Making reservations as necessary and receiving important information when we have emergencies. So it's also about continually updating the data that we receive and that we use for our planning purposes. We have newer sources, more comprehensive sources. It's updating our technology plan also. Will be coming in the next year. That's going to help us all get around Tahoe a little bit better. It's also about working on the transportation system resiliency. And that means to ensure we can safely get in and out of the region. So towns and corridors, the vision there is really this plan focused a lot on getting those residential units where we have good transportation infrastructure so we can reduce our environmental degradation. So that means also managing the system in our recreation corridors and taking a larger focus on travel demand management at our recreation sites and again, within our town centers. That means capturing the region's densest employment areas and where those affordable houses are being focused or housing is being focused. Next slide. So the plan was released on April 16th. Shortly after, we had our first public hearing at our governing board, and then we were on to the Transportation Commission and here in May, receiving comments from the commission and the public. So over the last month, we've been incorporating details and comments from those individual stakeholder meetings, feedback from the committee meetings, and of course, public feedback. So the staff report includes an extensive summary of the public feedback we received, and the detailed attachment is found on page 51 of your packet. Not all comments always relate directly to the regional transportation plan. Those are also included, and that's a good example is basin-wide evacuation planning. So evacuation planning is in our plan and coordination is discussed in the regional transportation plan. Technology especially, you just heard me how technology relates to so much when it comes to our first responders and emergency response agencies ensuring, that they have that support that they need to get the messaging out to us. But it's also discussed in chapter 4.9 of our initial study and initial environmental checklist. That means we included this time around a new mitigation measure to ensure that project implementation and construction is going to now be coordinated with emergency responders. So last week at the Tahoe Transportation Commission, we did receive a unanimous recommendation of approval for the plan. And that was after receiving a few comments from the commission. Those didn't make it into the staff report, obviously, 1 week. We had the meeting in the afternoon after the packet was posted, so I wanted to share their request. Commissioner Robbins, City of South Lake representative, he spoke about encouraging implementation of our local transportation needs before reaching out too far and wide with our limited resources to our Trans-Sierra connections. He also spoke and shared comments on transportation policies that really relate more to the TRPA authority, which you guys are familiar with. Those are the mitigation fees that are assessed through the project impact assessment. Those can feel a little burdensome sometimes for redevelopment. And also he requested that we think about that permitting process a little bit more and make sure that it doesn't prohibit transit and active transportation improvements, which I think you would all support, as do we. Next slide. So the final draft plan, no changes were necessary to our goals and policies. We made minor edits to chapter 2. Next slide, please. Oh, we're way behind. Oh, one more. There we go. No changes were necessary to our goals and policies. Sorry. Minor edits were made to chapter 2, and that's really the heart of the plan where I talked about all of those strategies, those 4 Ts. Refinements were made to the transportation operations outlook appendix. And this was a little different this time around. We really did do the full vision. All of those services are listed in the full appendices. And then we also updated project costs. And this one can always be a little challenging. In the regional transportation plan, before we begin our analysis, we have to define a base year. And that's always a few years behind. So that's 2022 this time around. Plans continue, projects continue. So we're always doing our best to update all of those project costs. And of course, we also updated our revenue totals. Next slide. The foreseeably funded projects, those are projects that have identified funding sources. Our final total for those projects is 2.46 billion. And then for our illustrative projects, those are also a part of that vision, but they just do not have funding identified just yet. So that's a total plan of $4 billion. Now up on the right, the foreseeably funding shares, moving clockwise, you have local, private, state, and federal. In this plan, local share is 40%, one of the largest. So the transit, those local shares include things like transit occupancy taxes and mobility mitigation fees that we were just discussing. Also, the totally foreseeable funded transit projects did not change from the draft. No changes were made there. We continue to forecast only being able to fund the existing services we have today over the next 25 years. So that's become a very hot topic for our region, and we're working diligently with all of the operators and other agencies so that we can raise additional funds over the next few years. That full vision, foreseeable and illustrative, does require an additional 22 million a year to get us to that full vision. Next slide. So public feedback and all of the plan updates did not necessitate changes to the environmental analysis. The plan is CEQA compliant. We analyzed all changes to the projects, the policy since the last RTP, and have incorporated new information on environmental conditions and new mitigation measures. I mentioned one earlier. Additionally, new biological resource mitigation measures now address sensitive species, newly listed sensitive species. And we also have a mitigation measure related to wildlife passages. That's in line with a new policy as well. We really want to make sure we're considering wildlife corridors when designing our transportation projects and also constructing those projects. Next slide. So here are those threshold standards that we analyzed for the proposed plan and programs and projects. We've been hearing, next slide, please. We've been hearing a lot about the need for us in all that we do at TRPA to make those connections back to those threshold standards. So here's a great project to do so. This is the SR 89 corridor plan. It's one of several corridor plans and it contains a lot of project recommendations for achieving our regional transportation goals. So this is a good example because we can explore then how those connections are made. This image is the Emerald Bay corridor. You guys probably would have picked that out yourself. It's all too familiar, especially this time of year. Next slide. So the pilot project includes safety improvements, VMT reductions, and parking management. And these have a direct correlation to our newer transportation sustainable communities threshold. This project is being piloted now, kicking off next week, in fact, with shuttle service from our North and South Shores and installation of roadside barriers for areas not suitable for parking. Next slide. The shuttle services and barriers not just support that transportation sustainable communities threshold. The shuttle services helps to increase action to recreation for those without a car. It also encourages carpooling, and these are directly connected to a few more thresholds. Carpooling helps us meet our air quality thresholds. Removal of unsafe roadside parking reduces the number of pedestrians we have on the roadway, and that helps us improve safety. Next slide. Now our outcomes, such as reductions in auto trips to Emerald Bay, helps again with our air quality, our transportation sustainable community strategy, and now water quality. Removal of off-pavement parking aids in that water quality and supports even our scenic thresholds. Reductions in congestion in the corridor then supports all of those things. So it was worth a minute just to sort of show you how big picture, all of those goals and policies, all of those projects really come down to those environmental thresholds. Next and final slide. So this is our schedule. We received a recommendation of approval for the plan at the Tahoe Transportation Commission. And today you have two motions for this item. First are the findings, recommendation of approval of those findings and finding of no significant effect. We want to make sure those are sufficient for the plan itself, and the recommendation of approval So trying here, Marcia. We practiced this. Today, the two motions are approving the findings themselves, right? The environmental analysis that supports the plan, and then you're going to be approving the plan itself. And the code and regional amendments will be discussed in this next item. So with that, I'm happy to take any comments and questions.
All right, thanks, Michelle. That was shorter than I thought it was going to be. Before I turn it over to my colleagues here, I was wondering, I know that you visited us a few months ago, I think when Ryan was still employed with you and he presented, but I know we did provide, feedback and made some recommendations. Maybe you could just tell us quickly how you incorporated our prior feedback. I think that might be helpful for us to hear. Thank you.
Hi, Rebecca Cremeen for the record. I think were you referring to John Hitchcock's questions about the coverage, and the code exemptions?
Yeah, that was one of
Okay.
them, but some
Yeah.
things like that, yeah.
Okay. On that one, we will cover that in the next slide, but we looked into a request to expand the coverage calculation exemption beyond what we were proposing. And we determined that we did not need to make any further changes. Right now, what he was requesting was that beyond a trail project, how do we incentivize bike repair stations and pullouts and things like that? But we looked at our practice for permitting and some of these trail projects, you actually can include that as part of your project. So it's usually included in the coverage exemptions already. If it's a standalone project, we'd have to look at that separately. In some cases, if it's just a standalone pole, it's actually exempt from coverage already. So in that case, we didn't feel like we needed to make any further changes to the code on that one. Was there any other specific questions you had on those?
Does anyone recall? I just remember we had a number of things, but maybe Garth, yeah.
Oh, I pressed the wrong button. I'm sorry.
There we go.
Yeah, attachment A, connections 2050 comment summary matrix identifies all the comments that were made here by APC, and there's a response noted for each one.
Thank you, Garth. Yep, I see that. That is helpful. Okay, looks like we're good there. So why don't I open up the floor and ask my colleagues for anything they would like to comment on or have questions for, and then I'll go to my colleagues online. Zach.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would just go ahead and, since especially he's kind of, it was the comments from previous colleagues were just mentioned during the Tahoe Transportation Commission, as well as the previous meeting that the chair mentioned. So I would echo those comments again. Sounds like some of them have been addressed regarding the coverage, but specifically, it would be good to memorialize, if we could, in the policy, the concept of perhaps reevaluating the mobility mitigation fees impact assessment tool and how it relates to redevelopment, and that redevelopment should be prioritized and incentivized, because really that is in and of itself a tool to address the environmental impacts that was mentioned in the presentation. The current structure of the mobility mitigation fee, especially the 5-year kind of sunset on existing buildings, does have an impact in private development. Being able to invest and redevelop buildings that have sat vacant, and that kind of creates a degradation of the parking lots and the other infrastructure that does impact the lakes. So, an example would be some language that could be added to policy 2.3, just discussing that, and we can provide that in writing, or I can read it for the record. But I think that would be good if there's other discussion on that topic with the APC members.
Mr.
Yeah, I
Chairman,
know
happy for you to add some language if you'd like in your motion moving forward. For your information, that is in our work plan that the board approved last month to look at the project impact assessment and VMT policies, including looking at the length of credit. We also have had some talk about setting aside some of the money to go to regional projects like the Emerald Bay project. The board's been talking about that. Was really great that multiple jurisdictions put money into that, because multiple jurisdictions have visitors to Emerald Bay, and not just saying all money goes back. We're looking at the zones. So the zones more closely align with the centers and the urban area, and less, the fees are up more in the rural areas, less in the urban areas, and particularly lower in the centers. So I think we've got what you're after, but happy to see if you want to put it into the staff report, have us put it in the staff report to the board. We're glad to reinforce that direction from the board to work on that.
May I just add as well? So yeah, echoing John, we've heard that feedback as well, and what John's saying is that we'll continue to work through that, but we have to be careful. You know, we can't make any policy changes to that fee here today. It wasn't agendized, so we can't really put anything specific. That really wasn't agendized for action today. So I don't know if anyone wants to say anything else, but I just wanted to caution on that.
So Brendan, I would just follow up on what Graham was saying. In addition to it not being agendized today, that was something that was not included in the environmental analysis. So it is something that's being worked on, but would have to undergo its own environmental analysis before some sort of action could be taken on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Mr. Hester, thank you for that clarification. Absolutely. You know, I think the fact that it is in the work plan, I think that is, you know, it's been memorialized, so to speak. You know, a reference to it in the staff report in general terms to the governing board, I think is reasonable. And it's you know, understood that it wasn't agendized and part of the overall analysis, but there's a path forward, it seems. Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve DeShare for the record. I do sit here as the representative of the Tahoe Transportation District, but of course have broader portfolio interests. I want to second what Mr. Thomas said. And sometimes because we have the regional plan and then we have the regional transportation plan, and all these separate plans, we don't cross-pollinate them as much as we should. I do know that in our minutes of the last meeting, there was a mention by staff that this issue of the mobility mitigation fee and VMT, you know, is going to be in the work plan. I would love to see a presentation to this body about the specifics of that. I think that would be very important because sometimes, you know, inadvertently, these different plans lay on different mitigations, and the cumulative effect is a disinvestment to the kinds of things that Zach talked about, older buildings, who's going to come in, who's going to renovate them. So I think that's very important. And I'll just add that in my written comments that I submitted to staff on the RTP SCS, I noted that, you know, there's always a lot of references to California Senate Bill 375. There are changes coming to that, I believe, even though they drink heavily from the regulatory soda in California. They are finally realizing that SB 375 is dated and that there have been other laws and bills come along. And so they're trying to sort out how they make it more contemporary and how they make it more contemporary with what California needs to do with regard to housing and things of that nature. So I hope we will be innovative in looking at those changes and keeping track of those changes and be willing to make modifications to those kinds of things as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I know we have brought this up before. I know Mr. Drew has brought this issue up as a concern. So thanks, Zach, for raising it. And why don't we see if it makes sense to get it into the motion, if we think that's needed, or if there's already enough direction and momentum in that direction.
I think why not err on the side of putting it into the staff report that you recommend we do that in addition to whatever you want to recommend on this.
Sounds good. Awesome. All right. Anyone else like to jump in? Mr. Young?
Good morning. Thank you. I really appreciate all my colleagues' attention to the details, like coverage for trails and mobility fees for redevelopment. Those are details that remind us the details actually are really important. I don't really feel all that qualified to speak to those kind of details. That's why I appreciate that others here can do that. But I do find myself, when thinking about a new transportation plan, that this is the plan we'll be living with for years to come. That's how we, adopted for some time now. We'll be implementing this plan. We'll be asking questions about it, trying to remember what we did today and what it said. Michelle's presentation is really a reminder of how critical the transportation plan is to us meeting all of those thresholds and to meeting the other goals of the regional plan. And whether we do a great job of cross-fertilization or not, they are deeply integrated in their goals. And particularly the transit vision of where we would like to go, but the whole vision of the transportation plan and the vision of the regional plan are intimately tied together, and that's what we're going to be working on for years to come. And I don't really have any issues with what I've seen, and unless I hear something going forward, I'm prepared to vote for this. But I still have a struggle. I still have an overall struggle, and it happens every time I come up on the weekend, not associated with doing a job, to drive around, to see, to have a bite to eat, to whatever it is that we do. And I know what that vision of the regional plan and the transportation plan is. I work on it with you. We all work on it together. And I try and fit it into what I'm seeing, and I try and fit it into how are we going to go there, and how are people going to engage with the lake 20 years from now. And I can't see it. I can't get it in my head of how it's actually going to work and if people are actually going to do it. And I kind of feel like, and this is not a criticism, I love the presentation. But when we have you see all the different arrows going everywhere, indicating what we're doing, multiple different arrows going everywhere. It's an indication of how complex what we do is. And I can't escape a feeling of that we're a little bit of a wing and a prayer that we get where we want to go. Now, I apologize for that. I really appreciate the professionalism. I appreciate the data. I love the data. I love working with, I understand the scheme. I fully get the scheme. And that's what it all is. That's what planning is. There's nothing wrong with that word. But I can't see it. I can't understand how people are actually going to engage with the lake the way that we kind of are saying we want them to do. So I'm going to move us forward today, and I hope we keep moving forward. But what would be really helpful for me, and maybe for others as well, and even particularly if we're trying to get funding, is some sort of a visual presentation, some sort of something I can watch and see that is the future of what it is that you're trying to achieve, that I'm trying to achieve with all of you together. That shows me somebody down in Reno wanting to spend the day up at the lake. What do they do when they get up? How does it work? How does it work when somebody wants to get up and go to work and they live here? I think in 20 years, we want them to live here, right? Well, I can't quite see it, and I don't know how it's going to work. How much transit is there going to be? If there could be at some point in the future, something to help me actually visualize it, actually see it, and understand how all these various humans are going to engage with the lake, that would be really helpful to me as I'm thinking about where we're trying to go and what we're trying to do. And in particular, when I have that passenger in the car with me up here on the weekend, and I'm trying to tell them everything's going to be okay. We're working on it. I know, I understand all your complaints. I understand you think we're all a bunch of jackasses. I appreciate your criticism. We're working on it. We got it covered. I'm struggling right now to convince them that that's true. And something that we could just put in a video or even a commercial for the public, even just to help me understand what it will really look like, what it will really feel like to be alive up here in 15 or 20 years engaging with the lake. So I'm going to vote to move us forward. Thank you. It's a great plan. I love the scheme. I get it. I can't see it. Any help in the future would be appreciated. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric. Oh, would you like to respond to that?
Well, only because Eric and I have been colleagues for years. And we've seen a lot of change down in the Reno area too. The way I see it is coming up 50 the same way I know you come from Reno. This year, there's not all the people parking by Zephyr Cove, for example, like there were. That's it's a small part of this, but it's to get people off of parking on the highway and into parking lots. You will see on 28 between 50 and Incline Village, a project coming soon with 250 some odd parking spaces. And well, what my point is you're going to see it happen little project at a time. Maybe some of them are bigger, and maybe we can do a better job bringing those to you and just making you aware of those as they happen. So, we'll try to do that.
Yeah, we, in the very beginning of this process, we had those characters that were on the first slide. And we talked about that. We said, Ezra's sitting on the North Shore and wants to go visit friends on the South Shore. And Ezra's going to be able to take transit or get in their electric vehicle. So we did a little of that in the very beginning. I didn't bring that to you today. But you're absolutely right. I appreciate your honest and open comments today. I get that too. I am working on these things and I have friends who say the same. But John is right. It is incremental up here. I wish I could wave a wand. We heard about this, right? We've got this great pilot going in Emerald Bay. It's going to be something similar. You're going to see less roadside parking. You're going to have more options. And what we heard is that, well, now that might mean a little bit more folks in Kings Beach, right? Because that's a little bit more convenient. So we are, there's that incremental process. And as Mr. Hester said, we can bring maybe more updates to the APC about those items so that you can tell your friends, hey, this is happening. This is what's going on. And hopefully you will feel it because they are coming.
Yeah, this is a big plan, and maybe we'll have virtual reality goggles in one of our future meetings and we can take a tour and see it. Who knows? One sobering graphic, that kind of gets at what you're talking about that I noticed is figure 4 in the RTP. It's on page 7. It shows the 2050 population projection growth outside the region. And it's a 28% increase in Reno, 24% in Carson, 23% in Sac, and 30% in San Francisco. So those are all our drive up markets, and they're all going to come here as it gets warmer down there. And there is some some reality check that we're going to have a lot of pressure here, no matter what. We don't need to market Tahoe. Everyone knows it's awesome, and that's why we live here. It is awesome. So the future's, yeah. I don't know if scary is the right word, but it's daunting. It's a daunting challenge. So Jennifer and then Kevin.
Thank you. I've been thinking along the same lines over time as well. And we absolutely don't need to market Tahoe. But I think what we would benefit from if it's already happening is seeing the marketing for transportation that's occurring. Are there QR codes in the hotel rooms that say, ditch your car, ditch the parking stress, take, here's an app here. How are we communicating with the folks that are coming up on what these options are, aside from maybe billboards on the way in, simple URLs, like I said, QR codes that are easily accessible. How do we currently communicate with our local and visitor population about these options? And, should we be targeting maybe some of our project funding specifically to marketing the aspects of the project that will actually make a difference to get to the vision? And how do we ensure that people know? It was a few years ago, my husband and I tried to get an Uber in Incline. That's where we discovered you can't. And there's no taxi service in Incline, at least there wasn't. But then since then, they created that little free shuttle bus service or whatever around town. And then not long after that, some friends up there, locals, were they were out drinking. So certainly weren't driving. And then they used that service because it was super helpful. And so, you know, do the visitors know what the locals know in these little microcosms of transportation? So to the extent that, like I said, we could incorporate that into a component of grant funding or something to have a specific marketing element for whatever that project is intending to do, to make sure that we not just do the project, but that people know about the project. I would recommend just that generally, you know, try to become part of our mindset.
Mr.
if it
Chairman,
isn't
it's
already.
clear we probably need to have a more than one presentation and involve Jim Marino from TTD, the general manager there. There are a lot of those pieces, and there's a lot of those pieces being worked on. I couldn't give you, I don't think any of us could give you a comprehensive answer today, but I know Steve sits on the board, and there's work on using parking and how that relates to, and how it can be used for funding, how the Lake Link money that comes from local governments can be pushed through TTD to get more federal money. There's all kinds of little pieces of the scheme, to use Eric's term, that are being worked on. And so I think we need to do a better job of bringing some of that information here.
Yes.
And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's also the destination stewardship plan. So anybody who thinks that, you know, the casinos and the other tourism agencies just market Tahoe for people to come here, that's not what they do anymore. It's really about destination stewardship and people coming here and taking transit and not leaving litter and all those kinds of things. There's a lot of messaging around that. So I think to Jennifer's points, it would probably be good to have a presentation on the destination stewardship plan here as well. So people have a sense of how Tahoe is, quote, marketed these days, which is much different than it used to be.
Yep, there is an effort going there. Kevin, did you? Kevin and then Robert, I
Yeah,
see.
I'll underscore what Steve just said. It's a jumping off point. I sit on the board of the NTs, the North Tahoe Community Alliance, and very few dollars are put into Come to Tahoe. A little bit of off-season encouragement, but it's these days it's how to come to Tahoe, what to expect when you come to Tahoe. It's an evolving thing, but there is a perception that we're still pouring tens of millions of dollars into trying to drive people here, and it's not the case, at least I can speak to concretely in North Tahoe. So first off, I know this is a big, heavy lift. It's, you know, takes a long time to put this together. So I appreciate all the work. There's a lot of complexity in the RTP, but the piece that I'll speak to is parking management. I appreciate that it comes up as part of the conversation. It's encouraged explicitly throughout the document. I think there were 39 or 40 instances of parking management in this new draft, which is a lot more than the last version. But we stopped short of removing minimum parking requirements. We stopped short of any sort of teeth or any sort of mandate to get into real parking management basin-wide. It's still piecemeal, which is a start. We have Emerald Bay, Kings Beach has a parking management program that we're kicking off. The ski resorts have had wildly successful results, driving more people to using shuttles by having paid parking and reservations. So we have local case studies where it's shifting behavior in the right ways. But I think we're still missing a huge opportunity here to finally draw a line in the sand and do what over 200 other cities have done in the United States, which is removing minimum parking requirements and implementing demand-based parking with pricing. You have to do the two together, as I'm sure everyone understands. And it's beyond just reducing VMT. It's about affordable housing. It's about walkable town centers. It's about smart land use. And I feel like we as TRPA need to be the leader in this and not wait, just keep encouraging individual jurisdictions to explore this. It's going to take it may never happen. And if it does, it's piecemeal and it actually has negative side effects or unintended consequences in some cases of driving more kind of spillover to where there isn't parking management. So it's no longer
kind of a niche concept. You know, the state of California passed a law stating that cities basically have to abolish minimum parking requirements statewide. We don't qualify for that up here because we didn't meet the transit requirements, so we're not required to do it, but the writing's on the wall. So when does this rise to a basin-wide priority where it makes it into the RTP as not a thou should, but a we're going to do this as a region?
I wish you could have been in our staff meeting yesterday. We were talking about TTD implementing a thing called Park Tahoe
Mhm.
For the whole basin. We were even talking about, back to Eric's point is, if I'm in Sacramento and I want to go to the lake, I can find out where there's a parking spot I can
Exactly.
pay for now before I leave. And if there aren't any, I'm not going to the lake.
Yeah.
I happen to have a condo in a metropolitan area.
Yeah.
And I can't even necessarily park in the parking garage next to my condo if it's full.
Yeah.
You have to reserve them in advance. And so that's the kind of thing that's the next step. And we are talking about doing that with TTD. So we'll bring that back to you.
And
If I may,
Sure,
yeah, we
yeah.
do have our policy is coordinate and maintain parking maximums where required and shared parking standards to encourage use of alternative means of travel other than single occupancy automobiles and support other goals and policies.
Mhm.
So I think that's the policy that you potentially change. Right? Maximum versus minimum.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I know it seems scary, but there are so many case studies now.
Yeah.
Large, small, large cities, small cities, tourism areas like us. It's no longer a question of whether it makes a positive difference to support whole myriad goals. It does. And I feel like we're behind the times. And if I'm understanding it right, I think that we're assuming in the RTP, we're actually assuming reductions in parking in VMT modeling.
I don't.
Is that incorrect?
I'm not sure I would say reductions of parking. I think what we assume in the regional transportation plan is management of those, but we're also very careful in our planning processes to make sure we're not just adding parking lots. So in those corridor management plans, we're actually reducing, right? When we remove parking from the roadside and place them
Yeah.
in parking lots, it's not a 1-for-1.
Mhm.
In fact, it's a little less, and that disturbs some people that,
Yeah.
that's a sensitive topic. But the
Yeah.
idea is if we manage it with reservation systems, with technology,
Yeah.
you actually get, the same amount of services. The car's not sitting there for 9 hours, right?
Yeah.
So there are some of those. I wouldn't say that technically there's an assumption of less. It's more about, the management of those spaces and the technology used to do that.
Yeah. Basin wide, it seems like we're focusing mostly on recreation areas, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But not a whole lot of focus. We're still not uncoupling parking requirements from land use and from redevelopment.
Yeah, working slowly on those housing amendments to actually focus on that a
Yeah.
little bit. We also have a study that we're working on right now, and TTD is going to take a little further to look at more of those management pieces in town centers also.
Yeah.
Not just recreation areas.
You all did recommend approval of parking maximums in the phase 2 housing stuff for
Mhm.
deed restricted housing.
Yep.
So that is getting put into the area plans.
Within the context of
Affordable housing.
deed restricted housing within town centers.
Right.
It's a start.
Yeah.
I acknowledge there's progress in the right direction, but at some
And-
point
and
we
it-
just go, we're doing this as a basin.
Yeah, no, we fully
Yeah.
are,
And I know it isn't easy.
no. If it was easy, it'd be done.
Thanks.
And just to be fair to Mr. Thomas, equal thing. I mean, this is another one of those types of policy matters that you're raising that I think we are hearing of. It's just, we can't do that that's not really before us, right? It's not part of the RTP specifically of our policy and our code of parking minimum. So not agendized today, and I just want to yeah, point that out for context, but also to recognize that, I think we're happy to hear those that input from you all.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I think that is really important and we've talked about that for years. So we just keep pushing from our end, right?
my comment wasn't about changing today's outcome as much as being on the record again. So we have we're moving in that direction, hopefully. But
And I can be sure, and the staff report is being prepared now for governing board to share that.
Thank you, Michelle. Robert.
Hi, Robert Ehrlich for the record, and I was not present on the May meeting, so I missed a lot of good discussion, though I did watch the video a while back. Can you come back to the slide you had that showed the funding and the 2.46 billion? Okay. One thing that caught my eye was like on page 48 of in the report for today. It talked about foreseeable project, which uses the phrase financially constrained, and illustrative projects financially unconstrained. So I'm wondering if you can use like no identified funding or schedule for implementation instead of financially unconstrained for illustrative projects. And I don't know if that was actually in the RTP. I think they defined this differently.
Could you say that one more time?
Sure,
I'm not quite tracking.
Page 48 of the report we're looking for, it talked
The
about,
staff report?
yes, funding and priorities. The bottom sentence there has like foreseeable projects and illustrative projects.
Okay.
And I was confused when it said the illustrative projects were financially unconstrained.
Oh, did we mix that? So foreseeable is constrained, illustrative is unconstrained. Did we mix up the terminology there?
Yeah, it's not intuitive. And I think elsewhere, I think in the plan itself, illustrative was defined as having no identified funding or schedule for
That's correct.
implementation.
Illustrative has no identified funding sources. And foreseeable in the plan
Right.
has a host, and that is in the appendix. It has every.
Well, referring to illustrative as financially unconstrained sort of
Yeah.
implies to a casual reader that it's not a issue because it's not constrained.
I see.
Yes,
We can change
that was
We can
confusing
change
to me.
that.
And then on that, you were mentioning on the budget, 2.46 billion foreseeable. And I think you mentioned something about $22 million a year.
So yeah, that's that lower right hand. It's the difference between 26 and 48, right? So foreseeable funds today for our transit projects is 26 million a year.
Okay.
That full vision that we talk about, and this gets a little complicated, right?
Mhm.
We don't want to just focus on what we can afford. We do want, as painful as it might be, to have a 25-year vision of where we need to go. And so it's that gap. That's what I was referring to, is the gap in getting us all those services from Reno, even from Carson, right? We don't have foreseeable funds to get the transit we want from Carson up to the summit. So it's that gap in funding I was referring to.
So adding the 22 million a year would get us up to the foreseeable projects or up to the illustrative projects?
The full vision, everything, both.
Okay.
Yeah, so 26 million is foreseeable funds identified in the plan. And then if you
Okay.
add in those illustrative transit services, that gets us to that 48 million. So that means we're missing 22 million a year is what we really are trying to raise so that we can have our full vision.
Okay, so I was a little confused again, sorry.
No,
Because
it's okay.
it's going same services as today. So is the funding for today, it's less than 26 million, right? And is that
I believe it's a little less.
okay, is the
yeah.
future value of the existing funding in 2050 would be 26 million a year?
Right, because we do have an inflation factor, right?
Okay.
So we will have a little bit more money, but it's basically covering inflation for the services.
So that's based on if we have the same sources of funding as we have now.
That is a great point. You're right. So the idea and what we've all been working on, many people even in this room, is finding new ways to get other sources of funds for transit operations.
Another point. Again, I was seeing the phrase active transportation modes is used to be more encompassing than just bicycles and pedestrians. I'm looking at like one of the tables on the staff report on goal 1, I think it was page 71. There's various other spots within that I think in one item, I think you've used the phrase active transportation modes. In other items, you're still using bicycles and pedestrians. And so I don't know if there's a consistency issue or why would be useful to look at where it just referred to bicycles and pedestrians to change that to active transportation modes.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
Okay, and then on the not accounting for need to come up with coverage for sidewalks if they're part of projects. I think that's a good idea. I'm wondering if there's still a way to acknowledge that there is this coverage, and that if we're looking at coverage for the purpose of figuring out how to size basins for the sidewalks, which might be included in the basins that'll be used for adjacent streets or development or something, that we can find a way to track the coverage, even if we're not requiring the project proponents to come up with coverage for the sidewalks. Like I'm good with that. There's goals that we want, that we're encouraging by not requiring them to come up with coverage for that. But just looking in the runoff, I'd like to see if there's a way to acknowledge that this new coverage is coming in, if it is new coverage, even if we're not requiring the project proponents to mitigate for it or have that come out of their coverage bank. I'm not quite sure how to.
Are you suggesting maybe tracking it even though it's not, right? Just.
Yeah, that there should be some mechanism that tracks that
Yeah.
coverage. And, if we're looking in a watershed, what do we have for coverage? I don't want those things not to be tracked as part of that. Even
Understood.
I'm in support of not requiring the people to come up with coverage for things that have other good social purposes.
We'll talk with our watersheds and water quality person, Shay, about how do we do that? Because catchment by catchment, I think is what you're talking about for TNDL. So you did nothing else in the catchment but put some more coverage in, you would expect there to be worse water quality.
Mhm.
So how do we track that and make sure that's not where we're
Right.
going? Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to how do we do that today. Maybe Brian does, since he's with Lahontan, but we get the idea.
We will cover, I mean, we might want to save this discussion for the next agenda item, because this really is moving on to the next item. Just.
Okay. And then a possible typo on page 87. The top of the page has the word beings instead of the word begins. So. And that's in the ordinance amendment, so I don't know if it showed up in that
Oh,
too. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I see Kate's hand online. Kate, why don't we go to you?
Thank you, Chair. Several of the things I was going to comment on have already been said, so I won't be repetitive, but I did want to talk about, like, piggyback onto the messaging. I'm a visual learner, so, the ideas of videos, commercials, it sounds like such a good idea, but with a long, transportation plan like this, it's hard, and you got to be real careful not to get too specific, because once you put it out there, then the public's going to hold you to that. So I think reading the packet and following the link to the plan was really helpful to me. I think it did give enough details for the plan and the blueprint, like here's what we want to do. But obviously things can change. And I think we've all learned that through different projects in the past. But as far as messaging, one of the things I think we could do better on is the different jurisdictions. For example, our VHR program, it was brought up about the communication of Now we're trying to say, hey, when you come to Tahoe, here's what we want you to expect. You know, is there a way to ensure that people who are part of our VHR program are renting a place, get that same message, and get that same information? Is there an avenue in the future where we can have the public participate or donate to different aspects of this transportation plan? Is the Douglas County's Visitors Bureau is, when people want to come to Gardnerville, Minden, or Carson Valley, I would say 99% of those people also travel over to Tahoe. Is that information is it the same information? Are we supplying our visitors to the valley that same interaction and that same information? So I think there's ways that we can strengthen our communication to the public, and ensure that the messaging is the same. But I really learned a lot in the packet, and I think it gave it a great blueprint. I think it would be difficult to create videos without, once you do that, then that's exactly what they're gonna expect. So I think, you have to tread lightly on really how much you can do, versus as projects come about, that's when videos seem more appropriate. But anyway, that's all the comment I have.
Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it. Crystal, I see your hand is raised.
Thank you. I just, I think I have a lot of the same comments that have already been made, particularly on the messaging. I think that's, little videos of, how folks can get around would definitely help. I think those are good comments. And just how do we reach people about the improvements that are already in place to move people around without being in their car, and different options. But then also like what's coming in the future, and understanding that, it's always about funding, right? There's a lot of great things in this plan, but funding is always kind of the crux, right? To get it implemented. But anyway, I did have a lot of the comments, particularly on the parking and the messaging. But I just really wanted to say thank you to staff. I wasn't here at the last presentation to APC on this, but I did look through the plan. I understand how these work, and understand what it takes to put something like this together. I know it's a very, very big lift. And so just want to thank you for all your effort. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Crystal. Final thoughts? Brian?
Yeah, I just want to say it's a really impressive plan. It's easy to read, even though I didn't read all 300 something pages. We're at 74. But the illustrations are great, quick to understand. And I just wanted to sort of ask, like, the plans are an aspirational thing, there's something we aspire for. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to meet every single goal. But is this plan written in stone for 25 years? I'm sure it's not, but it's in a document that can be adapted with adaptive management as time goes on. Is that correct?
That is correct. And thank you for that comment. One of the things we tried to do this time around, every 4 years, it's updated. We can get away with 5 also because we're in air quality compliant. But the thing that we did this time is we really did hone that aspiration a little bit. And that is why we heard this is a great vision, but we can't afford it, right? So people are now a little bit more aware of that gap in where we want to be and how we actually complete that vision. So it's a double-sided sword. We hear, oh, this is too aspirational. Now we're hearing, whoa, we can't afford all these things. So it's fun being a planner. I do enjoy my job, but it's not easy. Like I said, we want everyone to all be rowing in the right direction and trying to achieve those goals. And we do get to refine it every 4 to 5 years. And that means active transportation might be covering something we don't even know exists today, right? The hoverboard, right? We're going to have some sort of device where we're not even touching the ground in the future. So, thank you, Brian.
what was that, Back to the Future 2, maybe? Yeah. Yeah. I don't want an iPhone, I want a hoverboard. Life would be way better. Yeah, is everyone feeling okay? Looks like we are. I just want to say a couple very quick things. Thank you to staff for working with us to get our projects on the list and help us identify O&M funding also as a priority. I always beat that drum, so I'll just say it again. The 22 million a year, it's another big gap. I think it's all, it's a lot on us to educate our boards. A lot of that's coming from the locals now. And I see, there's an opportunity for all of us to champion Tahoe. My board is not in the basin. And so I need to go down the hill and continue to try to educate to bring more money up here to do the things that this plan wants us to do. The push on transit is really critically important. And I just want to commend, my board member Supervisor Lane for her leadership on the Emerald Bay pilot project. She's really been pushing. And I think, that's her job, is to push and let other folks kind of figure out how. But I just want to give her some kudos for what she's been pushing. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it works starting next week, right? Okay, so with that, let me open this up to public comment. Let me just send some reminders out. Let's see, to participate in the meeting, go to trpa.gov. In the calendar, click on APC meeting July 9, 2025. There you'll find a link to our webinar on Zoom. So if any member of the public wishes to comment on this item, please either raise your hand now by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called upon and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. I'll go in the room first, and I don't see any public comment in the room, so we will go online for public comment on item 4A.
Mr. Chair, there are no hands raised online to comment.
Okay, I'll close public comment. Thank you, Catherine. And we do have 2 motions to make on this item. They will be roll call votes because we have some members online. So would anyone care to make the first motion that is up on our screen?
I'll go,
The
Chair.
third motion will be an item B.
Sorry, are we ready for the first motion?
Yeah, go ahead, Kate, if you'd like
Okay.
to make it.
I motion to recommend approval of the required findings as provided in attachment D for the Connections 2050, 2025 RTP/SCS, and for the associated amendments to Chapter 3 of the Regional Plan Goals and Policies and the Code of Ordinances, including regional plan consistency findings and a finding of no significant effect.
I'll second that.
Should I-
This is Crystal.
Okay, thank you, Kate and Crystal. I'll just bring up our discussion on the mobility mitigation fee. Is it possible for us to add that to the motion somehow, or do we need a whole new motion? Legal team.
So I would suggest these are the findings. So these are the environmental findings for, and you're going to approve these findings twice today because they covered both the RTP itself and also the code amendments and the amendments to the goals and policies, which is your next agenda item. So these are just the findings, environmental findings, and a finding of no significant effect. If you wanted to include some additional direction to have a particular topic raised to the governing board, I think you could do it in one of 2 ways, and maybe Graham can weigh in on how he would prefer this. You could add a third motion today after you do the 2 here to approve the findings and then approve the regional transportation plan, or you could add it on to the second motion, which is approval of the regional transportation plan itself.
Okay, yeah, that's a couple options. Eric?
I don't know if this is a valuable option, but I seem to remember that we've done this in the past. We've relied on staff to provide our message to the governing board. And John does a really good job of articulating, this is what the APC said. Now, if these motions are too specific and detailed and we want them to be like that, then the motion may be appropriate, but I'd have to hear from the rest of you whether you feel that type of a extra motion is appropriate, but I'd be comfortable with John passing it on to the governing board.
Okay, yeah, we'll see. You know, I think you gave us two pathways there, Marcia, so why don't we see, you know, someone here I know might want to make up the motion or make an amendment on the second motion, but I think let's get this one done. And then we'll take that one on. So we have a motion by Kate, we have a second by Crystal, and Catherine, I'll go to you for a roll call vote on motion number one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Judge,
Yes.
Mr. Hill. Mr. McNamara,
Aye.
Ms. Marolis O'Neill,
Aye.
Mr. Thomas,
Aye.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Alling,
Yes.
Mr. Young, Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Chief Stephen,
Yes.
and Mr. Ferry.
Yes,
And Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
thank you, Catherine. Okay, let's put the second motion up. And we can, someone want to take this one?
So
Graham?
just, you know, I appreciate Marcia, I think laying out those two options. It's really kind of up to you guys how you want to do this. If you do insert something into a kind of a motion like this, which is already pretty, you know, we work on these wordings kind of detailed, it becomes kind of a subject to this addition. You know, sometimes having a third standalone motion that you guys are taking up right here, you can make one up as on your own as a third standalone that then, you know, you can vote on whether or not to put that in the staff report, and y'all can take individual vote on that, and it won't sort of complicate or make approval of the RTP subject to that addition to a staff report in the future. So up to you.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I have the draft staff report to the governing board up on my screen right now. With a recommendation for approval, TTC's recommendation, APC's recommendation, what Michelle, I guess, already stuck this in here while. Oh, it was you. Marcia stuck it here. On July 9, 2025, APC provided comments on Connections 2050 and recommended approval to the governing board. Those comments are, and then I was going to add in something on mobility mitigation fee and something on parking. If you want to use that approach, that's
Okay.
that's how it would get transmitted to the governing board, and Michelle would put it in the presentation, I'm sure. If you want to do a separate motion, that's okay too.
Okay, yeah.
Could I ask just that, Zach, would you clarify what change you were wanting to see? I got the general idea of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a few things. I mean, basically it was, Mr. Hester, I like that approach. I mean, I think, you know, the concept of a motion, I think I would support doing that. I also have full faith and trust that staff communicates that. So I'm kind of good either way on that. But to answer your question, kind of the topics are, I think, generally kind of included in the direction from the governing board regarding the work plan in terms of reevaluating potentially the mobility mitigation fee and the impact assessment tool with regards to impacts on redevelopment, feasibility on redevelopment, and improvements that could be made to encourage it, with the kind of background understanding of the benefits to doing that, such as you know, when land remains vacant, it deteriorates, that in and of itself impacts you know, the environment, the lake, the very things we're trying to protect. You know, also the concept of the 5-year sunset clause, potential impacts related to that. Again, I think it's kind of captured in the collective kind of direction to reevaluate that tool. And also the concept that, you know, if development isn't feasible, not just do you not get the redevelopment, but you also don't get the impact fee to begin with. So this kind of balancing it, just the concept of looking at the overall balance of that. So that was the general concept. And then I had also mentioned that perhaps there was to document that there could be as it gets to the board, amendments made to the changes to the proposed policies in the RTP document to kind of also document it there.
If I can,
It could be.
I could,
It was more answering that question to
and I could give you
rehash, but
some
it
more
could.
specifics if you'd like. We specifically, you know, at 5, you get credit for land use that was there in the past 5 years. We're talking about making that longer. The other one is aligning the zones for the fee to be more consistent with the adopted land use plans and less of them. I mean, I'm not saying we go this far, but give you an example. In Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County, they have 2 zones that the RTC uses. It varies by land use, but you only have 2 zones. We've been talking about maybe 2 or 3 zones per jurisdiction, you know, like urban and rural and maybe a center, maybe not. Depends on if we actually have data that show the travel behavior is different. So that it would be a lot simpler and maybe there'd be less discretionary review and more. So those are the kind of things that we're working on, if that answers your question.
Mr. Chairman.
I think Kevin's run into that issue as a business owner.
Yeah.
Specifically. So yeah, hits home. Steve, do you want to jump in?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just wondering, because this is a really important issue, but can you describe or summarize, Mr. Hester, what the work plan, I mean, I read the work plan. I know it's in there. The governing board has already adopted that. If we refer to that and ask that that be prioritized in some way, would that suffice as opposed to all this sort of nuanced language we have today?
We could make it as simple as that and say, or add something like with particular emphasis to the credit period and simplifying the system.
Yeah, I think based on the discussion, that'd probably be the more simple and straightforward way to go, which would be combining Mr. Hester's ability to explain that to the governing board as an APC action and yet not burdening a third motion or complicating the second motion.
Yeah, I think this meeting's already been talked about in the past, it sounds like in your report, even though we're doing it right now, but that's efficiency right there. So let's not convolute this motion. Let's get through motion 2 and we'll see if someone throws out a motion 3. I think we have a path without it, but why don't we just see? So why don't we try to get through this motion? Motion 2, anyone care to take this on?
Sure, I'll make the motion. I make a motion to recommend governing board adoption of TRPA ordinance 25-XX as set forth in attachment G1, amending ordinance 2019-03 as previously amended, adopting connections 2050, 2025 regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy provided as attachment B.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Kevin. And we have a second by Kate. And Catherine, I will go to you for a roll call vote on motion 2, please.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Chief Stephen,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Alling,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Ms. Marolis O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Judge,
Yes.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay,
May I just jump in a little on the,
Please.
okay, so we're either time to move on to the next agenda item. We talked a little bit about a third motion. I just, again, I'd just be careful because we didn't agendize this, even changes to the work plan, which is something I believe the governing board approved. So that type of thing wasn't on the agenda. People might be interested in that, mobility mitigation fee might not have, been on notice to make comments. So substantively, let's just be careful about, doing too much with something if you were thinking about a third motion.
Graham's cautioning us. How risky are we feeling? Jennifer has a question.
I just have a quick question about the layout of the meeting today. I do have something to discuss about the amendments to the goals and policies. That's the next part. Okay, I will wait.
Thank you. I feel comfortable with the direction we've given to you, John, and what's already been included in the staff report for that issue to be raised from us personally. So how are we feeling? You okay, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's been well documented. I mean, it's also documented in the work plan itself. So, and I think there's been good direction from the APC and commitment by staff to include that, including reading kind of a draft little setup in the staff report. And so
We
I
got a
think that's
preview.
pretty reasonable if everyone agrees.
Okay. Good. We're good.
Just one comment, Mr. Chair. So I read the full text of the work plan and the associated budget. I would encourage all of us to read the work plan. It's pretty detailed, and I think it really helps to inform a lot of the discussions that we have here. So anyway, I just found it very interesting and would encourage people to take a look at it.
Thanks, Steve. Okay. All right, we're not gonna be able to leave this one. Go ahead, John.
Never mind.
By all means.
I was gonna offer to bring the work plan to you and maybe do a short presentation in the future.
There we go. Force us to read it. Yeah. Okay, we have a solution. Thank you all. Okay, let me move us on to item 4B, and bear with me, this is a bit of a mouthful. So 4B is a discussion and possible recommendation of approval of a number of things. One is amendments associated with the Connections 2050, 2025 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy to accelerate attainment of the per capita vehicle miles traveled, or VMT standard, including the goals and policies of the Regional Plan, Chapter 3 Transportation Element, TRPA Code of Ordinances, Chapter 30.4.6, that's on land coverage, adding sidewalks to the existing non-motorized public trails coverage exemption, and Code Chapter 65.5, that's the employer-based trip reduction program, and 2, associated regional plan consistency findings and finding of no significant environmental effect. Information on this item can again be found on page 46 of your packets. And I'm going to go back to Michelle to present on item 4B.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One slide only, and pretty much you just covered it in your introduction. We did not receive public feedback that necessitated any changes to the environmental analysis or changes to the code amendments, and they are in your packet. We have a red line document so you can see those specific changes. No changes were made to the updated employer-based trip reduction or the sidewalk or the coverage limitations. We only received actually supportive comments. The 2 code amendments and the regional plan transportation goals and policy amendments were analyzed, as mentioned, through the environmental analysis of not just the regional transportation plan, but those were also incorporated. So all proposed amendments meet TRPA environmental and threshold compliance. Next slide. With that, I will take any questions.
Nicely done. That couldn't have been much shorter. Okay, so given what we've just heard from Michelle on these proposed code amendments and goals and policies amendments, does anyone have any questions or comments? Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Steve DeShera. So I know it's in the packet, but I think it would be good for the record, at least from my perspective, Michelle, if you could cover the part about the employer trip reduction and how this is more simplified.
Sure, I can take that, Steve. So over the last few years, several years, we've been working with a code working group to look at that employer trip reduction ordinance. It was adopted in 1992, so it's very outdated. It has very kind of prescriptive requirements for employers to do certain things based on a point system to implement this trip reduction program that we have on our books. So we took a look at that with a working group, including some employers in the region, to simplify it or basically update it so that that trip reduction ordinance is more catered to individual employers. So we'll be focusing on employers that are larger than 100 or more employees. And each of those employers will work with us or work to report out what are they doing to incentivize alternative transportation modes. So mostly it's a reporting kind of requirement where we have an employer platform where folks can do surveys to their employees and find out what their needs are, how they're getting to work. They can use a lot of our tools that we already have to provide information on transit and bike routes and pedestrian routes to work. So a lot of it is education based. So we really just kind of compacted that section of the code. So it's a little more flexible and we'll implement that in phases. So the first phase would be these larger employers, education first. Second phase, getting the data collected from the employers. Third phase could be how do we actually implement and monitor to make sure that employers are actually doing this. So that'll be the phased approach, and we need to work on that as the next step. But that's ultimately what we did with that code section.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate that explanation, Rebecca. You know, it's been my experience dealing with a lot of employers, including large employers, that it sounds simple when you say it. They don't really have the time or capacity to do those things. What does work with them for some of the more, astute ones is the van pool program. That's something that they can sink their teeth into. We're running 19 van pools here on the South Shore. I think they're doing 20 something on the North Shore. Not all of those employers are in the basin, but a lot of them certainly here on the South Shore, they're all in the basin. And that's just a little easier program for them to implement. I think it does accomplish the essence of what the employer trip reduction ordinance is all about. So I just wanted to make that comment. We're happy, speaking as a South Shore TMA board member, we're happy to continue to work with you all and trying to get more employers to do the van pool program. But unless you have somebody on your staff that's specifically dedicated to doing the things that you described, it's really hard for them to do. So that's just my comment. Thank you, Mr.
I'll just respond that a lot of it is even just capturing that data. Like we know this is happening already. So how do we collect the data and show that our region is making progress? This happened very quickly. The van pool program happened in the last couple of years. So we want to take credit for that. We want to give the employers credit for that. And we want to work individually with the employers to develop their own programs. So I think this code amendment helps with that.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with the code amendment.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get the discussion on the record. And, we get the van pool data every month from Commute with Enterprise. So if there's anything that we have that you all need, we'd be happy to provide it because we get that automatically. And that includes, VMT savings, GHG savings, as well as how many people are riding, where they're going to and from, those kinds of things. So happy to provide it.
Progress is being made already. Yeah, I remember a cool presentation that Tesla gave at a forum you guys held some years ago about their pretty progressive van pool type program where they pick up a lot of their employees down in Reno and drive them to work and take them home. Pretty cool. Anyone else have thoughts you'd like to share? Jennifer?
Thank you. One of the things that I've talked about over the years is not outpricing the semi-local regional residents. And one of the things that I I see there's not a change for, and I don't think there needs to be a change in goal 2. Goal, what's now number 2.3 in the environmental goals, to develop and implement project impact analysis, mitigation strategies, and fee programs to reduce VMT and auto trips. And I think, like I said, that goal is good as it stands. What I would encourage possibly for the staff report for future consideration is to explore what that might look like if there were fee structures for things like parking or even public transportation that provided a benefit or an incentive to folks that live in the region, in the basin certainly, but for folks in like Truckee and Reno and Carson and Minden, Gardnerville, Markleeville, folks in the border communities. Is there a way that there could be reduced fees, reduced, parking fees, reduced, transportation costs if they're not free already, so that we can, help the local folks, again, not be priced out of coming to Tahoe. Given that funding is already tenuous, I wouldn't necessarily recommend reductions, for locals, but maybe conversely increases for tourists, so that maybe they pay a little bit more and so that there's a feeling of a discount if you're local. And a good example of that, I was just looking at the state parks website. Sorry, California colleagues, but if you're a Nevada resident with a Nevada car, you only pay $10 to get into Sand Harbor instead of 15. So are there things along those lines that we could consider for the folks that live and want to recreate, bring their families up, just want to pop up for a picnic or those sorts of things, but feel like, $40 or $50 to park is just cost prohibitive? What can we do for the folks that live and work in the area and want to enjoy Tahoe as much as the tourists? So thank you.
Thank you. We have actually been working with this challenge, right? It's something I think we've heard at the city. The city has a particular ordinance that will not allow any paid parking, right, in those public spaces other than their structure. So how do we use that tool, right, and still encourage others? One of the things we've talked about for the Emerald Bay pilot is that it's likely, we want to make sure that transit is more competitive and cheaper than paying to park. Right. So that might mean a little bit more subsidy there, but those are the ideas. So thus far has been focusing on getting you out of your car, not necessarily having, but back to the city a little bit. I think that's what we've heard, is that it might be a little bit more palatable for paid parking if those incentives and those reductions are given to some of the local representatives. So it's definitely a topic at hand right now. And as we're doing more parking management and working with TTD, we'll be considering that.
Thanks, Michelle. Robert?
Would it be possible to add a phrase to number 3, non-motorized public trails, where it currently reads non-motorized public trails and public sidewalks are exempt from the calculation of land coverage subject to the following siting and design requirements and limitations? Add a phrase, something like coverage for exempted public trails and public sidewalks shall be tracked by watershed. Would that cause any problems?
Sure, I need to get a minute and go to that page.
Sure.
Could
It's
you?
I see it on page 87. By drain, what would be a catchment? Is that the phrase used? How does,
I think, I don't know.
what is the category of that's used more by TRPA and
Project area.
And the specific section again, please?
I'm seeing at the top of page.
Is there a numerical?
Yeah, it says
if you could?
3. Am I looking at this correctly? It's on page 86 of our staff report.
So
and
3.
It's the proposed TRPA code amendments for section 30.4.6 D3. And then there's a phrase that talks about non-motorized public.
Page 42 on my PDF.
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
That's why I wanted that section of the code. There was a,
30.4.6 D3.
Dan Segan from our staff is here. to
yeah,
respond.
it's not.
Oh,
Dan, you appeared. You look
Sorry, I was just listening in my office. I just wanted to clarify how we track coverage, because we already do account for the coverage that's put anywhere. So right now, we already exempt ADA, but that still appears in your coverage records that we provide you for the threshold evaluation, and we can produce that at any level. So the exemption here would just prevent the fee from being charged or the project from moving forward based on coverage related issues. It doesn't impact the tracking.
so the tracking for the project is that, I mean, like if it's a linear thing, it might go across various areas. Okay, so the project area would have a coverage. I'm just trying to figure out, is there catchments, or catchments are only non-urban, or?
Do you want me to try?
Sure.
So I've reviewed a bunch of bike trail projects when I was at TRPA. And, you know, linear public facilities are a project area. What's that? And although coverage was accounted for in the regional plan update, like whenever that was 12 years ago or something. And so when I was reviewing those things, we didn't really, we said, well, the coverage has already been mitigated. So there's no coverage mitigation fees for linear public facility, like for non-motorized linear public facilities. So, and then as far as water quality goes, whenever somebody puts coverage down, you are required to mitigate a 20 or 1 hour storm from any new impervious coverage. So if you're putting a bike trail through the middle of somewhere, you're required to install BMPs and a sidewalk as well. But the majority of sidewalks are probably usually already on existing coverage because people are already walking there on shoulders and things like that, dirt shoulders. So some of that could be grandfathered coverage. But if you're expanding it, you're also required to do water quality BMPs anytime you put coverage on the ground. And they do track in the thresholds. I was going to say that earlier.
So I'm fine with no mitigation fees, but in terms of tracking coverage, I'm almost hearing that if the coverage is mitigated, it's not counted as covered, it's not tracked as coverage, or it's tracked as mitigated coverage, or?
Well, you don't have to pay a mitigation fee, or if it's grandfathered coverage, you also don't have to pay a mitigation fee. So mitigation fee has no bearing on.
Dan wants.
Dan Segan again, TRPA. The mitigation fee is separate from the tracking. So the coverage mapping that we do basin wide is done by LiDAR, which is basically, it's a plane flown over the basin that shoots a laser down and maps where you're getting hard coverage on the landscape. And so the only way that you don't appear on the tracking is if you're soft. So if somehow this was soft coverage, or it wasn't appearing on the beam as coverage, then it wouldn't appear in region-wide tracking. But whether or not you've paid a fee or mitigated for the project is the tracking is indifferent to that. So even if you never came to us and you put down coverage in your backyard and there was no permit application, there's no fee paid, that would appear on the overall tracking.
You would be found.
You will be found.
Yeah, I don't, okay, I'm just trying to figure if, and that's done whenever LiDAR is updated.
Correct.
Which, I'm just trying to have this be included in acknowledgement of coverage. LiDARs every 10 years, maybe.
Yeah, so we've done it at 5 and 10 year intervals, depending on funding availability and when other partners have a use for LiDAR. So in between, we track based on permit conditions. So even if you haven't paid a fee, which, so the existing system, you don't pay a fee for ADA coverage, that still appears in our tracking, because in the paperwork that tracks the permit, we still know where you're putting the coverage and what land capability class that is. in, so it still appears in the tracking.
Okay. And
So I think it's similar to, if you think of we currently waive our mobility mitigation fee for deed restricted, affordable, moderate, or low income housing.
Mhm.
But their VMT generated by those projects still appear in our overall accounting for VMT in the region and the trips. It's just the separate system for what are we charging for versus what are we tracking.
Trying to incentivize. That's what,
Yeah.
you know,
yeah, I'm good with not charging. I'm just trying to figure out the way where coverage is tracked and,
This is just for sidewalks.
well, if there's an amendment on that, it would, if we asked to change that, it would also apply to I think the language would also referred to non-motorized. That section also mentions non-motorized public trails. I mean, you're looking at making an amendment to include and public sidewalks. If we talk about if anyone else thinks it's useful, then that would also apply to tracking the coverage on the non-motorized public trails.
I think what you're hearing is we're tracking it anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's correct. And so yeah, we're tracking it anyways, but the other piece I would just add from the legal side of things is, and this is what I always say, when we make changes to code or rules or even policies, we're trying to be very exacting, right? All we're doing here is just adding and public sidewalks. So from like a structural, our current code says non-motorized public trails are exempt from the calculation of land coverage. We don't have that additional statement about, adding language about how coverage is tracked here. So I don't really suggest, or I would suggest that the addition of and public sidewalks isn't something that, warrants perhaps this additional piece, because it's the addition of and public sidewalks really shouldn't require that additional something where you don't already have that.
Jennifer would like to jump in.
Just for clarity, this section probably has a certain relevance, right? It's public sidewalks, if this change is made, would be exempt from the calculation of land coverage. That calculation of land coverage is probably for a specific purpose related to coverage fees, as opposed to just being exempt from the calculation of land coverage for any purpose, right? So when this piece of the code of ordinances in section 30.4.6 D3, I think maybe getting to the root of this is, how is this exemption applied? What are they exempted from? And that understanding that might help, because much like when we adopt regulations, we're just adopting the piece, we don't have the whole regulation. So having a better understanding of how this particular piece fits and what that exemption applies to just might be helpful for conversation purposes, and might help to answer the question, if that makes sense.
Shannon, you want to clarify, or?
Yeah, thank you. Shannon Friedman with the Environmental Improvement Program. And I can provide a little clarification I think may help answer your question. So the code is that these facilities are exempt from the calculation of land coverage. So as others said, it's not triggering any mitigation fees. And that was done to help incentivize these projects, reduce the overall cost of them. So the money's going towards implementation of the trails and not mitigation fees. All of these projects are permitted by TRPA, or for some sidewalks, maybe the local jurisdiction. And we do track the coverage based on land capability, but they don't pay the mitigation. So let's say somebody comes in with a project to do a bike trail. They do submit a table that says there will be 500 square feet of coverage and land capability 5. And it's just tracked, so we know how much new coverage is for that project, and then it's consistent with what was analyzed in the RTP. But then beyond that, they're not required to do any mitigation beyond best management practices where they're applicable, as Brian said. So it's tracked in a few different ways, like how Dan said, and then also on a project approval specific basis. And then that goes into our like Acela and LT info tracking system. Does that help clarify?
Yes, I'm just wondering, would it be possible or useful to basically just add the word fees are exempt from the calculation of land coverage fees?
Can I talk?
Sure.
It's not just the fees they're exempt from, they're also exempt from over coverage. Like, for example, if you're building a bike trail through land capability 3, you will be allowed to exceed, the coverage limitation of, I guess it's 5% of 3. It's been a long time. Or 4. So you can exceed the land coverage standards for the Bailey land capability system. So you're also exempt from that. It's not just fees. So it's basically the Bailey system, ignoring the Bailey system in a way. That's what you're kind of exempt from, and from paying mitigation fees.
But you still have to do your BMPs on the added
Definitely,
coverage.
yeah.
So it is mitigated.
And you also have to reduce and, try and avoid SEZs and things like that, or build bridges and, do the least harmful way possible. But it is tracked on the plans that Shannon stamps for a bike trail going across, say, Kale Meadow there. There's land capabilities, and there's a stamped approved plans by TRPA with the coverage table by land capability class. So it is tracked.
Okay.
You feeling okay? Reasonably? Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Let me look online. I don't see any hands raised. Everybody feeling all right? Okay, let me move us to public comment on this item. This is on item 4B. So just again, to participate, go to trpa.gov, click on APC meeting July 9. There you'll find a link to this webinar. So if any member of the public wishes to address the APC on item 4B, now's your opportunity. Please either raise your hand by clicking the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your telephone, and you will be called upon and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. I don't see any public comment in the room, so I will go to you, Catherine, for public comment online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no hands raised online to comment.
Okay, thank you. I will close public comment. Any final thoughts before we go? We also have 2 motions on this item to make, which are largely, they're similar, maybe exact, one of them.
The first one is approving the same set of findings and the finding of no significant effect, because that document covered both.
Right, okay, thank you. Okay, anyone care to make the first motion, which is now up on the screen?
I'll make the motion.
Go ahead, Crystal, thank you.
Hey, I make a motion to recommend approval of the required findings as provided in attachment D for the Connections 2050-2025 RTP/SCS and for the associated amendments to Chapter 3 of the Regional Plan Goals and Policies and the Code of Ordinances, including regional plan consistency findings and a finding of no significant effect.
Thank you, Crystal.
I can second.
Let's go with Robert, because I think that second means a lot. So Robert
Okay.
with the second. And Catherine, we will go to you for the roll call vote, please.
Mr. Judge,
Yes.
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Ms. Marolis O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Alling,
Yes.
Mr. Young, Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Chief Stephen,
Yes.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, we have a second motion, which will be on the screen momentarily. This one is a new motion. Anyone care to make this motion?
Sure, okay. Move to make a motion to recommend governing board adoption of ordinance 2025 XX as set forth in attachment G2, amending ordinances 87-9 and 2019-3 as previously amended to amend chapter 3 of the regional plan goals and policies and code of ordinances as provided in attachments E and F respectively.
Thank you, Zach. Second, anyone?
Second.
Eric, thank you. Catherine, over to you on a roll call vote.
Thank you. Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Chief Stephen,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Young, Mr. Alling,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. McNamara,
Yes.
Ms. Morales O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Judge,
Yes.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, I think we did it. Congratulations.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate all that feedback, and we'll be sure to see it in the governing board packet.
Thank you. Good luck at governing board. Thanks to TRPA staff for coming in to help us out. That was good.
What else we could say, see if anybody else comes back.
Yeah, well, let's see who else we can pull out of their offices. Bring them all in here. Okay, that concludes our public hearings for the day. It's 11:24. We're doing pretty good. Let's go on to reports, which is item 5. And I will go to Mr. Hester for the executive director report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Hester here. Following up on items you've acted on before, the threshold evaluation you recommended that the governing board accept and issue, they did. So that's the most recent. As some of you or all of you may know, some of you know for sure, you are the chair, your chair is the chair of the Tahoe Living Working Group. And the Tahoe Living Working Group had 2 days of workshops. Mr. Young attended, Brendan was chair there, and others may have been there. I didn't take roll, but a lot of good discussion in 4 half-day sessions that will, what they're working on is identifying priorities to ultimately recommend to the governing board to work on. And they were covering everything from creating more development rights, restricting development rights, to streamlining processes, a whole lot of things. There was a 90-page report from the consultants on things to look at. And if you, Mr. Chairman, want to add to that, I'm happy to have your help on that. Where it will go from here is there are now community meetings that staff will be having on the North Shore and the South Shore. From that and from the work that came from the Tahoe Living Working Group, they'll take a list of priorities to the governing board for what we should be working on in the next phase, which is basically implementing that, making code amendments and so forth. So that's kind of indirectly some of the results of your work as the chair, as the APC, as the group delegated that responsibility to run the Tahoe Living Working Group. Upcoming items, Washoe County's Tahoe area plan is coming. Placer IPES is coming. We were asked to look at evaluating that, and should we change the IPES score, so we'll be bringing that to you. City of South Lake Tahoe has a Midtown area plan amendment, or I guess it's not really amendment, it's new. It's the third of the city's area plans. And believe it or not, I actually had this on my report before you took your action today to bring you an item on the project impact assessment, VMT policies and regional plan amendments. So I was going to do that anyway, but and then I've added today work program, and then a presentation or presentations on how we're implementing the RTP from us and TTD, and something on destination management. So plenty of things to look forward to. Happy to answer any questions, or Mr. Chairman, if you want to say anything about the Tahoe Living Working Group. Otherwise, I'm through.
Thank you, John. Yeah, we did have 2 full days in this room. It was cordoned off with lots of folks and breakout sessions and lots of discussion and folks on all sides of the housing issue. I think where we landed, I think the group tried to push on some ideas that need to be changed, we think, in order to really advance some housing. Things like looking seriously at coverage requirements for ADUs, looking at development rights requirements for ADUs and other types of housing, fees, mitigation stuff. So it's going to be really interesting. It'll be a, political challenge at the governing board, honestly. These are some foundational tenets of TRPA, if the coverage system potentially gets amended for certain types of development, that's a big deal. And so we push some big ideas and it'll be interesting to see where it goes. It may come to us at some point as a body to consider. And so that'll be a good discussion, I'm sure. So, any other questions for John? Jennifer?
What's an IPES score?
Yeah, it was more detailed version of Bailey's for residential parcels. And Brian probably knows more about it than I do.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, so you did say Placer County IPES, right? Because that's the jurisdiction where the IPES line never moved. Right, okay. All right. Why is that coming up now?
Because the conditions that allow you to move it have been met, not to take it all the way down like has happened in some of the other.
Right, like to
jurisdictions.
0, yeah.
But, or 1, I think is what
Yeah.
it goes to, but there's enough information tentatively, and we're working with Placer staff
Oh,
on
okay.
this to reduce it somewhat.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Which then allows potentially more parcels to be developed. Good, very TRPA term, IPES. Okay, I'm going to you, Graham, for the general counsel status report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to take the chance to make you aware of a new case that's out on the street, a new judicial decision that came down in April. I've briefed the governing board about this and we've taken some action related. It's really more of a governing board matter, but it is something that affects the way that TRPA approves projects and or particularly how I'll cover that, but it is something to be aware of as we work in the basin. This case it's called Harash versus TRPA. I don't know if anyone's already heard of it, but it involves staff issued permits. So back in 2021, staff level issued a peer permit after a hearings officer decision. So that's kind of just it's a little bit of an extra level of, but it's still staff. It's a little extra process to go through the hearings officer process, but it's still a staff issued decision. So not issued by the governing board. It was a peer permit. And the neighbor that to the people that got the peer challenged it. They didn't want the peer. And one of the arguments that they made, and they took it to appeal. They appealed the permit to the governing board. And under our current rules, the way that when a staff issued permit is appealed to the governing board votes 5-9. You need 5 votes of the state in which that project is located, and 9 overall to revoke that permit, to basically pull it back. So the burden is really on the appellant in that case to get the governing board to have 5 from the state in which the project is located and 9 overall to pull back that staff issued permit. So that when he appealed that, the neighbor appealed that to the governing board, the board voted, basically nobody voted to revoke or modify that permit. And so he then went to court, and it was what the court ended up deciding after years of, we were waiting for a decision for a while. It was brief years ago. But basically what the court said is that when an appeal goes to the governing board, the board actually needs to vote that majority to issue the permit. So it really flips the burden on, you know, if somebody appeals a staff issued permit, it basically makes the governing board have to issue that permit in the first instance. So there's some implications there. Anytime, you know, when staff is issuing a permit, we're often working internally, but when you go to the governing board, now you need more people to agree to go forward on a project. So, you know, if it could mean that there could be smaller projects that get to the governing board that require approval if people appeal. So I just want to let you know that that case is out there. Some people are talking about it. And if you, I will also mention, sorry, I'm talking too fast, but last month, at the governing board we amended our rules so that now it's in the rules that the staff or the governing board needs to vote according to this court's opinion. So we've already fixed the rule, and the court sent that pier project back to the agency. So we're going to be taking that this month to the governing board to actually have them pursuant to the court order revote on that pier permit, even though the pier is already built. They're going to have to take an action to approve it by the full 5-9 vote. So if you have any questions now or anytime, just shoot me an email. Like I said, anybody working on projects in the basin, it's definitely something to be aware of. Most likely that would be, I mean, I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Wow. It's a big deal.
Kevin. Graham, just to be super clear, then this is any staff level permit issued across any type of project. I mean, transportation.
Yeah.
Could be
if it's
building
appealed,
project.
if it's subject to an appeal, right?
It seems like this is a big deal because it opens the door to probably a lot more project appeals.
Correct. Yep. Yes, that's true.
Wow.
Do you? What? Go ahead, Marcia.
I don't think it'll necessarily increase the number of appeals. So if people have an appeal option today. The only thing that changed is the way that the governing board votes. What the court said is you shouldn't be denying the appeal. You should be deciding whether or not to approve the project. And so it just shifted that perspective a little bit, you know, that the board is going to essentially review it, what in court you would refer to as de novo, right? So the court isn't bound by the previous court's decision. In this case, the governing board isn't bound by the staff decision. They look at the facts, they hear the staff report, and they decide whether or not to issue the permit. And so it just shifts that analysis a little bit and the voting, but I don't know that it necessarily makes an appellant's chances any better, right? It doesn't give them any advantage.
And that doesn't affect like we hear a lot of appeals and we do them the way that you were doing them, where the board has to vote to actually agree with the appellant, not to agree with staff's decision. So that won't affect the way that local governments handle appeals. It's specific to TRPA.
It's specific to TRPA.
Okay.
Yeah, and it originates from all is relating to language in the compact and TRPA specific voting requirements that come from the compact.
Okay. Great. Garth?
Yeah, that was going to be my question, Graham. I mean, if that was in the in the compact, on what grounds did the court have to modify and change that sort of voting rules? Can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, they didn't really modify. It was based on the court's interpretation of the compact's voting requirements. That was what the issue was. So basically what the compact says is that, you know, unlike APC, for example, where you all take action by voting just a simple majority of the quorum, the compact lays out specific voting requirements. So when the governing board is, for example, adopting an ordinance, like when we take this back, there's you know, specific four members of each state agreeing with each other. For projects, it's the 5 members of the state in which the project is located, 9 overall. And what this litigant, the neighbor, argued successfully was that that requirement of the governing board voting 5-9 to approve a project. When it's, they can't, basically when somebody appeals a project, it was insufficient to vote 5-9 to grant the appeal to basically revoke the permit. It was like, that was something that TRPA as an agency internally had sort of constructed or interpreted. And
So the language in the
didn't agree.
compact wasn't specific to that. It's basically an interpretation that TRPA had over the last
Yeah.
many years. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Jennifer.
Merely because there's many layers to permitting in the basin. If you're looking at the state level permitting, if a permit that is issued by like my agency at NDP were to be appealed to the State Environmental Commission, their action is to uphold, modify, or send the permit back to staff for revision or revocation of the permit. So the State Environmental Commission would have a similar role, but they have to actively make a decision either to uphold, modify, or revoke. So I think it's kind of along those lines, but that's what you would expect if something were to appeal to the State Environmental Commission in Nevada.
Okay, thank you, Graham. All right, APC members, I'll be coming to you for any relevant reports you'd like to share. So we'd love to hear it. Garth, I'll start with you.
Mr. Chair, nothing at this point in time. Thank you.
Thanks, Garth. Eric?
Thank you. The 2-day workshop seminar that TRPA did with the Tahoe Living Working Group was extremely worthwhile. I appreciated it. And I hope that those kinds of conversations can continue. They were very open and frank, and that was all invited. It was an incredibly cordial and open working environment. And I think it was a great model for just engagement and discussion. And I just want to say one more time to TRPA, thank you for doing it. And I would encourage, as the Tahoe Living Working Group goes forward, I don't know that kind of thing is being done by anybody else. So I know we're all getting the invitations and we're all interested in it, but if those invitations could be expanded to more the APC and some, if you're not getting them, if you are getting them, I would encourage you to come. When you get an invitation or you hear something about the Tahoe Living Working Group, it's probably going to be worthwhile. They're good discussions, and we'll see where they go. But don't ignore those invitations. And if they're not going out, I would ask that they do go out to a broader group of TRPA people, because I think we would all find them worthwhile. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Kevin? How's the beer flowing at Alibi? Next time, yeah, bring a sample. Thank you. Yes, new rule. Can we get that in the, somewhere? James? Yes, Mr. McNamara?
Sure.
Turn your mic on for us. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. The Tahoe Living Working Group, also free food, catered, Mexican food catered. I recommend going. Thank you.
The food was good. Yes, thank you. Robert?
Just some storm observations from some of the thunderstorms and hailstorms we had last week. I live in an area of the Gardner Mountain where a project was built probably mid-90s that routed flows out to a couple different locations. One would take it down with a bunch of drain inlets and a rolled curb out to a large basin that was built on Forest Service land and that could really handle the flow, and that's why the basin's built. Walking after the storm, I could see that the drain inlets, and I think this is pretty common, were clogged by accumulations of pine needles and debris. So flow that was captured on the curbs on the side of the road bypass the storm drain inlets, go out to the end of the street, do not get into the basin, flowed more than 1,000 feet into an ephemeral waterway that was probably flowing, that it's not the most hydrologically connected one, so it goes into Pope Marsh. But there's a lot of, I think I was out a couple days afterward, and with my feet, I just kind of kicked all the sediment that was blocking the storm drains, because it just bypasses around it if you have a buildup. So there are a lot of projects probably in areas that are more hydrologically connected. And so that the whole design of a lot of our premises basically is we want to catch the 20-year 1-hour storm, which is the intense storm that actually causes runoff and probably has maybe sheet flow coming off of parcels that everybody's removed all the pine needles from, for example, and it will also carry all the road runoff. So there should be some kind of work to try and get either the jurisdictions or volunteers to kind of get out there and maybe prevent these things from being blocked. Otherwise, the idea that these are actually going to be effective during the storms they're designed for is really at question. I mean, because the intense storms are these 20-year 1-hour ones. This one was probably less than an inch. But if storm drain systems aren't, are they blocked, they're not going to send water to where they were designed to go. And maybe there'd be some way amongst the jurisdictions to identify the areas most at risk and either prioritize getting public works folk out there, or maybe work with groups like, I don't know, the league or something, to have volunteers go out and just kind of with a shovel or your foot clear them so water will go into them. And this is something I've observed for many years, and I saw it again pretty strongly this week.
Thanks. Yeah, that was an intense storm. Hit pretty hard. I saw Brian writing some notes down, so maybe he'll take your advice and ask us to do some more things. But we do, we as El Dorado County do have like a hot spot storm drain crew that goes out ahead of those storms. Theoretically, those were like, it was like a 20% forecast, I'll say. And so it was, if you read a 20% forecast, do you mobilize a whole crew out? Maybe not. So those storms built quickly and caught a lot of people by surprise. So I think that kind of thing happens, but yeah, we need to be out maintaining our infrastructure for sure. So Garth.
In addition to county public works or city public works, I know that the League to Save Lake Tahoe in the past, and I think they currently still have it, it's called a pipe keepers program, where they test at the outfall of certain storm drain pipes for water quality. Maybe an expansion of that program to include sort of maintenance of DIs and other things like you're talking about, Robert, might be something worth talking to them about.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that. I think, I have 2 storm drains right in front of my house. My street's flat and they were completely clogged and the water was just sitting there pulled up. So I went out there and just pushed it out of the way with a little hula hoe. I mean, it was amazing. I've never seen that happen. I've been on that same spot for 35 years or something. So it was a strange kind of series of storms 2 days in a row. So I think the appropriate place to discuss this would be the Stormwater Quality Improvement Committee. We meet monthly. All the municipal users are there. Douglas County, El Dorado County, Caltrans, and DOT. And maybe we'll have that up for discussion. Brendan always attends those. So. Good idea.
Russ is the new chair, so he loves that kind of stuff. Jennifer?
So speaking of storms, the July 3rd one that made the news because the fireworks barge and incline didn't work out so well. I haven't tracked it the last couple days because I've been traveling, but last word on the weekend was that there were still over 600 ordinances or fireworks sitting at 175 feet below the surface, and which is a very technical deep dive team to try to figure out how to get them back up. So there are at least a half a dozen state, local, and federal agencies involved, but one of those entities is our duty officer program that has been tracking it. So I've been working with our Bureau of Water Pollution Control and our Bureau of Safe Drinking Water over since July 4th when we found out about it in the morning. And there's sampling that's occurring in various things. So if you have questions and you're not sure who to turn to, I can connect you through our duty officer program. If your folks are interested in follow-up, or if your public asks questions or those sorts of things, we can help to connect you with an appropriate person that might know the answer.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't, that's a lot of fireworks. Wow. Hope they get them out of there. Zach?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to report. Mr. Hester, thanks for mentioning the Midtown plan. We're getting close to bringing that forward to completion.
Good. Thanks, Zach. I'll go to members online. Crystal?
Nothing to report today. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. How about Mr. Steven?
Hello, just a few updates from the fire agencies around the lake. It's been a busy start to the season with lake calls, and we're seeing a start to the fire season early with we've had almost 4 fires down in the Reno Carson area. Had to send multiple resources down there, so we're seeing a early start. Increasing our situational awareness around the lake, leading to our burn restrictions going into effect around the lake. It includes no solid fuel burning, gas-fed fires only. That's around the whole lake now. We're making a lot of progress with fuel projects around the lake, include improving critical infrastructure, improving some temporary refuge areas if we were to have a start with the evacuation issues, we can put people in safe areas for the time being. And then we're working on critical or evacuation routes with power companies and road companies around the lake. So we're making some good progress there. A lot of work going on right now. That's all I have to report.
Thank you for that work, Chief Steven. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. How about Kate?
Thank you, Brennan. I should have noted earlier, I apologize to my camera. I am remote today and my laptop camera does not work. So I apologize for that. Anyway, I'm happy to report the county is finally moving forward with the Tahoe Douglas area plan. This is a plan that was actually drafted over 10 years ago. It went through the county hearings, but never made it through to TRPA. Ran into a couple roadblocks, but finally 11 years later, we are moving forward. The contract was approved to get this done. And so we'll be having our first engagement, public engagement session, and we're looking hopefully early fall. And we will be coordinating with TRPA staff to ensure this process goes smoothly and we engage the public. But we're excited to finally get this area plan completed. It's been a long time coming. So as for now, that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Kate. I'll just say quickly, we're, El Dorado County is doing a number of mobility type projects out in the Myers area. You've probably seen those. We're building a new roundabout at Pioneer. We've been sealing our bike paths and building a new sidewalk and class 1 facility down Apache Avenue to connect to the new bike bridge that was built down in Paradise Park. So that's all really good work that we're proud of, and the community I think will benefit. That roundabout particularly is going to be a pretty big deal. So other than that, we also actually, I'll just say, got our first administrative draft of our area plan delivered to us by our consultant team late last week. So called the TED, the Tahoe El Dorado Area Plan. So we're continuing to push that forward, and it'll be here at some point, but it's got a long way to go. So all right, thank you all for that. Why don't we go on to item 6, which is our public interest comment period. Let me look at my notes here. Catherine, I'm not going to have you read that whole statement, I don't think. I think I'll just say This is our public interest comment period for the meeting. We'd love to hear any public comment. Could be on anything you wish. We'll take public comment in the room first, and then we'll go online. I think APC members are prohibited by law from taking action on any issues raised that are not on our agenda, as Graham has reminded of us today. And I think that's sufficient. So let's look in the room. There's no one here, so I'm assuming we have none. And any members of the public who wish to address APC now, please raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your telephone, and you'll be called upon by a TRPA staff member. So Catherine, I'll go to you for any public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no hands raised online to comment.
Okay, we don't have a lot of public participating today. They're outside enjoying themselves, which is great. And I will move us on to item 7, which is our adjournment. Anyone make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Garth. And I assume we're all in favor. So we stand adjourned at 11:53. Thank you all and go enjoy summer.